Okay, it's recording.
Okay, guys. So what I wanted to do is I think it's very valuable to do a 2-minute summary from the day before because it just gets your headgear into it. It's like warming up a gym. And that's going to be very, very helpful. So one of the things is that I realized when I was reading the commentary, both on Rashi, etc., that what we touched on yesterday has its own share of complications regarding Keren and scriptural sources. I don't know if any of you went to the Bava Kamma link to see that there were slight differences in the language and the wording.
Yes.
Or you didn't. If you didn't, you didn't. It's fine. Just let me know.
No, I didn't. I was so busy. I didn't do it.
Okay. And Marco, you were hectic as well. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So fine. Let me just go through a couple of finer points that wasn't made too clear yesterday. And even from doing it yesterday, there's some finer points that have come to play right now. Okay, because I did it about half an hour before we all met, just to see the exact sort of wording. So again, just to do a quick summary, which is the easy part, is that ox has 3 primary categories. It has keren, which is damage done through goring. It literally means the horn. It has ashain, which literally means the tooth, and that's damage done through eating. We'll see other damage and its subcategories is also through a process of physical gratification, just like the animal has gratification through eating. And then the foot, which is regel, is damage done through normal movement. In the case of regel, it's done by walking on things and trampling things. So the Gemara at this point digresses, and it's looking for scriptural sources for keren. It's obviously going to go through the scriptural sources of Shane and regel, which we will cover. But I just wanted, in the summary, just to clarify some wording. Okay, so what it does is it starts off, I'm just trying to make this easy, starts off with the case of, so it starts off with kiyigach, and kiyigach refers to goring, and the sourcing of it is with Tzidkiah ben Kana, fashioned for himself horns of iron. That's the source that's brought about in the Brisa. Now, for some reason, it's brought about in the Brisa before there's a biblical reference point, and we're going to see one in a minute, something we never covered yesterday, because what we were doing yesterday is just setting the scene a little bit without going into too much detail. So what happened was Yosafat, he was the righteous king of Yehuda, and he entered into alliance with Achav. And at that time, Achav was a very wicked king, and Israel was split up into, your 10 tribes and your 2 tribes. And Achav wanted to go into war with Aram, and Yosafat wasn't convinced. He was a little bit nervous, so he said, I want you to gather 400 prophets. I remember Gavin and I learned this in Sanhedrin. Do you remember this with Rav Simcha Steinhardt?
Sure.
And there was a particular prophet, his name was Tzidkiah ben Kanaya, who forged horns of iron and announced, with these you shall gore Aram into submission. So the sourcing of with these you shall gore Aram into submission is what we're talking about here. However, there is a slight issue, and that issue is that the horns were not attached to the animal. Obviously, if you look at the Viking culture or any warring culture, many of them, I don't know if it was that practical in war, but they wore these horns and these helmets. Like yours, Michael mentioned, I think yesterday, Asterix and Obelix, which is a great example. And I actually took a picture in the Bava Kamma group to show in the museum, in the National Museum, one of those Viking horns. So I think it was more to terrify the enemy and protect your head. I don't think any human would use it to gore. I promise you, if I saw 200 people running at me with helmets and horns and spears, I'd run. So it would work. Anyway, it's detached. Regarding the sourcing of this is Malachi. There's 2 books of Malachi. This is the first book of Kings, and it's 22:11. The reason that I'm saying this is I will send you a scriptural source picture in Bava Kamma. The reason why it's difficult to share the screen now is because it just wastes a lot of time to show you 2 lines, then bring up the Aramaic, then show you 2 lines. It's just going to take a lot of valuable time. So all the sourcing I can send you afterwards, so you can check up on me, which I'm hoping you will do. And I'm more than welcome any criticism where you say you were wrong here and wrong here, because in essence, we're just trying to find out what is true. And sometimes I miss things. So that's the first case that the Gemara brings up. Now, the second case is actually the quote in Exodus, and I'm just going to read it to you. It says, if an ox shall gore a man or a woman who dies, the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, and the owner of the ox is absolved. So the term shall gore, we're going to see what term it uses there. And there are slightly different words in the passive form of goring, the active form, the detached horn form, the attached horn to the animal, the fact that the animal is taking a charge at another animal or person and goring them, the fact that the animal claps you and pushes with the horns, the fact that the animal pushes with the body, all of these issues we're going to go through, but they all need to have scriptural reference. So the second reference is in Exodus, and I'll just tell you where that is. Give me 1 second. Okay. I'm going through like a million pages here of sources. So excuse me, guys. It's not.
No, that's fine.
It's not
just
too
relax,
fun
enjoy.
I'm driving a plane and the engine's got a hole in it, but you all enjoy the flight. Okay. So it's in Exodus 21:28, and it reads, if an ox shall perform the gicha upon a man or a woman, and the person dies, etc. Okay?
Okay.
And it uses the term yigach. So, and here it says negicha. Okay, so I'm just going to explain the slight nuances of the wording. And before we get to that Exodus scriptural verse, there's one other verse, and then I'm going to tie it all together for you guys. So the last verse, Marco, yeah?
Excuse me. Negicha is an unattached horn.
We're going to go through it now. We're going to go through it now because there are actually 4 different words that are used. That's where it becomes quite complicated. I know, right? It's like not fun, but we'll go through those 4 words, and it's going to become a little bit clear. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a quick summary, and then we're going to go through what that means. So the last verse, okay, which you'll find in Deuteronomy 33:17, is talking about an issue of an ox in his ox-like one, majesty is conferred upon him, and his horns are the horns of Re'aim, with them he shall go. Yenegach, nations. So you can see now it's using another word. Yegicha, Gicha, Yenegach, Negucha, etc. So I'm going to explain these words according to the associations. So again, you've got 3 sources. The first source that you have is the Brisa, and the Brisa is talking about the war with Achav against Aram, trying to entice the king of Judah at the time to help him. So that's the first line. And that particular one is when one of the prophets is actually using a headgear of unattached horns.
Okay.
Because what happened then is they had to do a bit of convincing and salesmanship and showmanship to get King Yosafat into the war, because he didn't trust Achav. So the prophet had to get him involved. This particular prophet, there were 400. So that's the one stage. So that is a scriptural reference to detached horns. Now, we're talking about a case in Exodus, the primary case, which we mentioned before, of if an ox shall gore a man or a woman and they die, etc. That's the second part. That's in Exodus. The third part is actually found in Deuteronomy 33:17, and it's talking about the kings that descend from Yosef. It's got a very complicated way of saying it, but the bottom line is it says, majesty is conferred upon him, and his horns are the horns of Re'aim, with them he shall gore nations. Okay, So now that you understand the three verses, before we understand the nuances of the word, which we are going to get into, we've got to understand why were those three verses necessary. So firstly, why is the brisa mentioned before Exodus? Because the problem that the Gemara has here is that all sorts of halachic rulings only can occur from the Torah, from Chumash. They can't occur from writings and prophets and brisas, etc. They must all have a scriptural source in the Chumash. So why would it mention the brisa first? So the brisa is coming to bring across one point, halachas that occur when an animal injures with a detached horn. And it's pretty unlikely that an animal would have a detached horn, but I'm going to give you one or two different examples now.
Okay, that'll be nice.
Thanks, Rob. The first example is when an animal is given, for example, how do I put this? Headgear in war. I don't know if you've ever seen those movies with the horses. That horses were given that metal headgear, and you had the Knights of the Round Table and
got that.
Lancelot and Camelot and Guinevere and the whole shtick there. The horses were protected because if somebody grabbed a mallet and tonked the horse on the head, the horse is expensive. You need a new horse. So horses got armor as well. Also, you didn't want to be arrow fodder. So what would happen in a war is that the arrows would rain down. I usually use that term rain because there wasn't accuracy like Robin Hood. They'd sit down on one knee and they'd shoot thousands of arrows in the sky. And if that arrow hit you, problems. If it hit your horse, expensive. And that's why horses obviously had headgears and body armor. They also used, for example, horns on an animal because if an animal is galloping like a horse, it doesn't naturally have a horn unless it's a unicorn. If you found a unicorn, I'm sure you'll be a very wealthy person. But most horses don't have any horns. So if you attach a horn in battle and that thing's coming at you at 120 k's an hour and that thing impales you, it's going to hurt or kill, that's for sure. So that's what you call a detached horn. It doesn't naturally grow in an animal. I think I mentioned this case once to Gavin or Michael, is we had an Alsatian called Rocky, and the dog loved its bones. You could give it bones and it would walk around the house with it. And this dog once ran past me when the doorbell rang and cut my hand open with the side of the bone, and that thing bled. So that's an example of a detached bone or a detached horn that actually can cause damage. Unless it happened to me, I never would have thought such a case would have existed today. But then you could have, if it was another person's dog, and they had something that damaged you, you could have a supposed legal case. So the Bryce is talking about a detached horn. We're going to get its application now. Then your second issue is talking about a case in Exodus where the animal actually gores you in the traditional sense. What happened in the traditional sense is that when you're sitting there, an animal uses its leg and it kind of kicks back the sand a couple of times and it comes to charge at you. And I don't know if you've ever seen these videos where the bull, you saw the Three Amigos with Steve Martin. Michael, you saw? So there's a one scene where Steve Martin's relaxing there and he's got a bit of wheat in his mouth and he's chilling. And this ox in Mexico is busy scraping its horns and he keeps like waving at the ox and he nearly gets himself killed because he's not that bright in the role, Steve Martin, but most people are. And the reason it brings the case in Exodus of a charging bull is because it has this halachically different significance to a bull that uses its horns to do injury or butt you. In other words, two animals are next to each other and the one irritates the other, it'll turn around and clap that other animal with its horns, or a person, a kid, that are teasing the animal turn around and try and butt the gate on that person with the horns. But that's a different level of intensity to charging. Remember, charging, we're dealing with the speed of impact plus impaling. So that's more likely to kill. So when it uses the term in Chumash, goring, it's implying the charging, and it uses the term shall kill a man or a woman, because obviously the impact of that speed is much more devastating than a slight clap of the horn. So The last source, in terms of Deuteronomy 33:17, when it refers to the kings that descend from Yosef, there it's using obviously another example of a horn in terms of an ox, because what it's trying to do in the last case is it's using Re'aim as the concept of the horn and the goring, and not just necessarily the ox. It's more that, how do I put this in an easy way? It's more a reinforcement of terminology in different ways that says, because you've got kiyagach, nigufa, yenagach, etc., etc. So there's different ways, and Deuteronomy is coming to just bring the words between the verb of it, the noun of it, the adjective, etc. So one of the things that the Gemara brings is it's got a problem with bringing the source from the Brisa and from the words of the prophets, because it said that we don't derive any halachic matters from these sources. So why are you bringing it? And the point of the Gemara says that it's merely a develation of the matter. And in the simple English, what it's saying is it's a terminology issue. The one thing that you can derive from it is that terminology does count. You can't determine degree of damage, half damages, compensation, etc., without a Chumash source. But if you want to show that a word has got different associations, by all means, you can use other than scriptural sources to prove that case. So that's all it's saying when it brings those other cases, okay? And it brings us the certain words. So one of the issues that we're going to talk about is that the term for charging and goring that an animal does brings a case of mankind, because it says with mankind, mankind has got 2 more levels of protection than an animal, according to Rashi. Because what happens is, I brought this case to discuss with Arthur last night. When you see an ox that's sticking its foot back in irritation, looking to gore another ox and charge another ox, what does another ox do when it sees another ox trying to confront it?
Going to do the same thing, eh?
Exactly. Oxes are not that bright. It's like a Chihuahua and a Doberman. The Chihuahua doesn't think it's going to come off second best. It's got no concept of its own limitation and size. So what happens is when animals aggravate each other, and you take 2 dogs past each other for a walk, they want to kill each other. So when an ox starts to take its hoof back and give the sound to the other ox that is looking for a confrontation, the other ox does the same thing. So Rashi brings that a human being has the intelligence to know that when an ox, except if you're Steve Martin, but if you're any normal person and you see an ox, or you're Spanish, the Spanish for some reason they got this bull run in Madrid where they let the ox loose and people try and outrun it. But the Spaniards have never been that bright in cases like this.
And they're also drunk when they're doing it.
That's it. I was going to say, you know what, Gavin, that was it. It's part of the ritual that some of them get absolutely plastered, which doesn't help their running. Okay, so to get back here, Rashi said any normal person, what happens then is that they've got indicators that can tell them that the animal's aggravated, and it's unlikely that they will be gored to death, a man or a woman, unless they cannot get out of that particular area at that time. So they have an awareness that other animals don't have because they like the conflict. Rashi brings another point, and that point is you've got what you call a mazla. Now, a mazla means luck or fortune. A mazla is a guardian angel, and everybody has a guardian angel. So say a person A is trying to kill person B. Person A is held responsible for trying to kill person B in Shemaim for the premeditation or attempted murder. However, whether person A is successful is determined by Hashem and Hashem only. A person has divine protection and a guardian angel, which an animal doesn't do. An animal isn't going to find the cure for cancer or corona or any virus or anything like that. It's an animal. It's lovely. It's cute. It helps for transportation and doing chores, but it's not the same level as a human. I know if the human rights activists listen to the shir, they're not going to be happy, but that's a fact. So here it's talking about when the biblical term of goring, of which we do determine halacha in Exodus, is a case of it doing man. Now the other case where an animal's horns can affect man is not really mentioned as a serious issue, and that is when an animal claps. Just hang on, I've got the cat stuck here in the window, this muzik, right? All right, apologies guys for the delay. So the second type of damage with the horn, before we put the technical terms down, is a term known as pushing. And that's when an animal pushes with the horn. So in other words, it's in close proximity to the other animal, and the animal irritates it, and it turns on and butts the animal with its horns on its head, or kids are throwing pebbles at it, and the animal tries to knock the fence, etc. But we all know without that sort of distance, accumulating speed of goring, of the traditional form of goring, it's unlikely to cause death, and it's more likely to cause injury. So that's the other word. I'll bring you the Aramaic words and Hebrew words now. Let's just discuss the concept. And one of the issues in terms of attached horn and disattached horn is as follows, is we learn at this point the concept of muad and tam. And now the concept of tam is if an animal in English is tame, meaning it's not known to have a nature of goring. It does a temporary once-off incident, and sometimes over a period of years it might do a second or third. If it does it the fourth time, it's known as a muad, which is a habitual gorer. It's got a habit of doing it, and it's the very nature of the animal. The term muad is referred to meaning warned. That's literally what it means, because the owner is actually warned of the goring damage. Now, we would have thought, by the way, because it brings the source of the attached horn, that if an animal attacks with a detached horn, that is the reason why you're paying tam, half damages, and it had nothing to do with the habitual behavior of the animal, and that was the extenuating circumstance. So what it brings here is a proof, the brisa wasn't wasted at all, is that even if it's not part of the animal's body, but it's headgear put on by the owner, or it's got something in its mouth and it damages with that is considered payable damage, and that you can still make full payment for that if the animal is a habitual gorer, and that's not the reason why you pay partial damages. In converse, it said the other way around. Why does it bring an example of an attached horn? In case you thought the example of the detached horn is so unusual that you don't pay any sort of penalty at all, because of the fact that it's so weird and unusual. So we would have thought maybe you don't come to pay any damages, and the issue of the tam and the muad for the habitual goring of the animal or the odd nature of the tam animal has to do with only horns that are permanently attached to the animal. And on that particular case, it wants to bring every example to show that in fact you do pay. So before we go through the halachas of tam and keren, under keren, of tam and muad, it's going to now bring the tordos of keren. And the tordos, the subcategories of keren are as follows: negifa, which is pushing; nashiva, which is biting; nevitza, which is squatting; and uvita, which is kicking. Now, I just want to bring one point now in the shir. We're going to discuss this next time. Is that Rashi said that the negifa is actually referring to pushing of the body. In other words, not of the horn. There is a whole discussion on what the word means, but just know that there's another type of pushing, that the pushing of self of the body does count. So if, for example, an animal is irritated and it turns around, and we learned this case, I don't know if you remember, with Bilam and his donkey, that his donkey tried to crush his foot against the wall of the cave. Remember when the donkey saw a malach, an angel, and was scared to proceed, and Bilam hit him, whipped him. And the donkey said, why have you whipped me these 3 times? And he crushed Bilam's leg against. Don't you remember Bilam was crippled after that?
Yeah.
So that's a case where the body actually cripples a person. Okay? So that is a form of damage. Biting, squatting, and kicking. Remember, every torda of Keren is exactly the same as the up in that its animal intends to damage its irritant, whether it be a person, another animal, that thing that's irritating it, it wants to stop the irritation. So it's going to do whatever it has in its capacity in order to stop it. So those are the some tordos when you're relating to biting, squatting, kicking, and pushing of its body. It uses other things at its disposal in order to stop that irritation. Now, we're just going to go through a couple of word differences here, which are important. Yeah, guys, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just a question. Just the Bilam example. I mean,
yes.
Wouldn't that belong to the subcategory of, the primary category of shame? The actual when he rubbed against the wall and whatever else. I mean, why? I mean, are you using the example specifically under this category for intentional?
I am, and Marco, it's a great question. The reason being is as follows: is that firstly, you could say there's going to come a question with regards to shame. In other words, if Bilam's donkey tried to bite Bilam, that would be a question. But surely shame is tooth, and therefore biting could be under shame. Or maybe if the animal tried to kick Bilam, kicking would be under regal. But here, Keren's damages are, the bottom line of it is, even though it might mimic shame, shame is eating. So biting is not the same of eating, because the concept of shame is gratification of the animal. You know, rubbing itself against something for joy, or eating for physical gratification. Keren only has to do with intent to damage. Shame has to do with animals' physical gratification. So it's a brilliant question. The reason it's brought here is only to say that this an animal does, the category of Keren and the torda of Keren, in response to in response to trying to injure and intend to injure, as opposed to eating or walking, etc. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so there is a term. Let me just see if I've got it here. There's a term yigach, and there's a term yigof. Okay, so those term differences, yigof is when it pushes with a horn, and yigach is when an animal is charging. You get what I'm saying? So that's and then when you have the word nagifa, that's when it's pushing with its body. That's all I wanted to say. So those are the 3 terms. But as long as you understand the concept, that's the most important thing to me. Does it make sense, Gavin, Arthur, Michael?
Yeah. It's just like you say Yigof. So is Yigof, Yigof also still, are we still talking about Keren now? All under Keren.
Yes, Yigof has to do with clapping with the horn. In other words, just an activity where it kind of headbutts something at close range with the horn. It kind of is just in an irritated state. Yigach is the charging and the running of the bull for a much higher devastation. And then Nagifa, according to Rashi, has to do with pushing of the body. It is a bit of a discussion, but those are the 3 concepts that are absolutely agreed upon.
Okay.
So I just need to tweak that document. Make sense?
Yeah.
Hundreds.
It's hundreds. It's very good, by the way, so far.
Yeah, no,
Thanks.
absolutely clear. Yeah.
Okay, listen, I know scriptural sources can be a little bit difficult. I'm no expert, but I did put in the work to understand it, because all these words and all these concepts they're like a minutiae of detail. But Marco's question was great, because it would seem that obviously if an animal kicks, which is one of in with intent to damage, it would seem like it's walking. But walking is the animal's common occurrence of how it walks, and it happens to damage through trampling or through its feet. This is a case where an animal's feet are used to actually cause destruction and intent to damage. And the same thing with Shane. Shane has to do with the eating of biting with the teeth in order to consume and enjoy its food, whereas this is under the category of biting, biting neshiva, to bite its irritating human that might be aggravating it or another animal. So this biting is with pure intent to damage. So it's not put in the category of what it's doing, but why it's doing what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And what you've got to know is, I just want to end off with one quick statement. Rav Papa, remember the start of with Rav Papa, he said, how are the avos similar or dissimilar to Tordos? And we've proved now with Keren that the Tordos are exactly the same as the avos. Exactly the same. And if you want to say that Tam and Muad is a case where you pay Tam in the Tordos and Muad full damages in the Av, it's not true, because the primary example of Tam and Muad are given with Keren, which is the Av. It's the actual goring itself from the scripture source from the Torah. And that has nothing to do with whether it's an Av or Tordot. That only has to do with if the animal is a tame animal. Tam, in other words, in its lifetime, it does less than 3 times. And after over a period of 10 years, it's not a lot. Or more than 3 times where the owner was warned and it's full payment damages and no leniency given. So that has nothing to do with it, because that is a case of an Av, which is a scriptural source which should be most stringent. That's why it brings the Tam and Muad example on Keren itself. And Tordos are just as stringent as the Av, and they represent the same sort of conceptual category. So in this case, Rav Papa has established that the Tordos and the Av of Keren are totally similar, exactly to each other. Is that clear? That's what I wanted to end with.
It's very good.
Yeah, can I just say?
Yes, Mark. We've got 2 minutes left before there's
irritating question. Okay,
yes.
If you're saying the Av and the Tordos are the same within that category, you mentioned obviously in the case of Tam versus Muad, I mean, Tam is can be a less severe case, can be, for example,
yeah, but that's for the Av. In other words,
half payment versus a full payment. So isn't there a slight difference? Or
no. And the reason being is, as we said a few moments ago, and I'm pleased you brought this up, is that when it mentions Keren, which is the Av source in the scriptural source of the Torah, the Tam and the Muad of the half payment and the full payment comes with the Av, as well as the Tordos. It's exactly the same. It's not getting half payment because it's a Tordot. The case in terms of Tam and Muad of Nege Shalom, like half payment and full payment have to do with the Av as the primary example in the Gemara. It's not the Tordot. So that leniency applies to the Av as well as the Tordos. They're exactly the same. It's not the Tordos that are getting the leniency and the Av getting the stringency. It's exactly the same. It's whether the animal is a habitual gorer or a non-offensive animal. And that's exactly Michael White brings the case of Keren, the scriptural source, to show that it's the Av that gets the leniency or the stringency depending on the nature of the animal, and not that it's a torta. So it's a brilliant question. I hope I cleared it up for you.
Very clear.
All right. Can I ask a silly question? Sorry.
We've got 45 seconds.
It's fine. How do they keep track? If you had